Hey, seventh graders. Today we're going to talk about the events that led to the start of the French and Indian War and the Battle of Fort Necessity. In class, we're going to take a look and talk a bit about this guy. If you can't tell, it's George Washington. And you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what's going on there? A, I don't see his white wig or white hair. Well, that's not the case in this George Washington because he's young. He's got dark hair. He's a young man in his early 20s. You might also notice that he's wearing a red military uniform, which is the uniform of the British Army. Yes, George Washington, father of our country, the commanding general who defeated the British, was crucially important in playing a role in the British military. That's right. He was a British soldier because, well, he was a British colonist. When he was born, he wasn't necessarily a Virginian or an American. He was British. So when he decided to serve in the military, naturally he served in the British military. And young George here is going to play a big role in starting the French and Indian War, which is ironic since he will begin the first cause towards the war, which is the French and Indian War, and then he'll be there at the end of the war at the Battle of Yorktown. So in a lot of ways, George Washington is the bookends, the beginning, the end, the alpha and the omega of an American independence movement. Wow. So this moves us to the start of the war. 1754, tensions are increasing greatly in the Ohio River Valley. See lesson number 1. Oops, misspelling there. Fix that. So, and George Washington is ordered by his commander, James Braddock, to build a fortress in an area of western Pennsylvania where 3 different rivers, the Monongahela, the Allegheny, and the Ohio River, all meet. If you can get to a spot where there's a tributary of 3 different rivers all combining into one, and you can then control that area, you then can control traffic on 3 different rivers. That's really important. So Braddock, who is the British commander in North America, wants control of it. And he sends George Washington there. Why George Washington? Well, Washington, before serving in the military, was a really successful surveyor and architect. He was really good at surveying land and seeing where the best place was to build things, and at designing and building and structures. So Braddock wants control of that area because war's already breaking out in Europe and carrying out throughout much of the French and the British's colonial possessions, and it's almost inevitable that fighting is going to start in North America. So today, that same area is Pittsburgh, and you can see there's a reason why Pittsburgh is called the Three River City, because you have 3 rivers that all merge into one right in that area. So in that one spot where the Battle of Fort Necessity takes place is right near present-day Pittsburgh, where the 3 rivers meet. So the French, however, since it was in French territory, controlled by the French government, had already built a fort there because, well, it was an important place that they also wanted to control. So, what's Washington supposed to do? He can't go back to his commander, Braddock, and say, yo, James B., couldn't build the fort because the French already did one, so sorry. So instead, he builds a quick makeshift fort, really ramshackle, basically a couple broken trees outside of the area of Fort Duquesne, which is where the French were controlling, where he ultimately wanted. His goal was to try to draw the French and the native forces out to attack him, and then he'd be able to double back and defeat them and then take control of the fortress. So this quick fort that he builds out of necessity is named by him as Fort Necessity. What Washington doesn't plan for is the way that the French and the natives are going to fight him. They don't fight according to traditional British warfare and really traditional French warfare rules. They don't come at them lined up in columns. They don't fight organized in a way that the British and the French have been fighting each other on fields of battle for the past few hundred years. Instead, they're using guerrilla tactics, hit and run tactics. They're shooting them from his soldiers from far away rather than trying to engage them directly, wearing them down over time. And Washington can't deal with it. It's not in his training to be able to fight this way, and the French and the British beat him. But Washington provokes the French and the natives, trying to get them to attack him, and it works. And this starts the beginning of war between the French and British. So Washington starts the war. We're going to see that just like Washington gets his rear kicked really bad in the beginning of the war, the British are going to continue to get their rears kicked really bad. And Washington is going to learn a lot from these experiences. So, what role did George Washington play in the start of the French and Indian War? Write out your answer on the exit card and post it on Google Classroom. Thanks so much.